And welcome to Weather Geeks. I'm Dr. Marshall Shepard from the University of Georgia, and we have a really fascinating show today. Trust me, just stick with us on this. We've got Jim Root, who's a professional fisherman or angler, I guess is the proper term. And we also have Chris Scalley, who's the head guide and owner at River Through Atlanta. And we're going to talk all about weather and fishing. Some people might be saying, what's the connection there? But there is a connection. First of all, tell us a little bit about who you are. Let's start with you.
So I grew up in Roswell, Georgia, along the river.
Yep.
And
Chattahoochee River, for those not in Georgia.
That's right, Chattahoochee, and was very lucky to have that in my backyard, and we've taken advantage of that opportunity all through our childhood, and now I get to play even as an adult on the Chattahoochee River here.
And Jim, I know you're sort of northeastern. You've actually got a little Weather Geeks connection. Tell us about who you are and what you do as a professional angler.
Yeah, so it's good to be here.
Thank you. I know you're a fan of the show,
yeah,
too.
I am. So I'm a fisherman and a writer,
Yep.
and I have a personal weather station, so I really keep track of different types of weather patterns and stuff like that for my journal, and how, you know, those things correlate to different lures and things like that to use while you're on the water.
Now, let's just get it in. If you're just turning into the show, tweet out and call your family that fishes. This is a really fascinating show. Jim, tell us, how can weather information, how do you consume weather information when you're fishing or making decisions about fishing?
So basically what I'm looking for is, you know, the important things are cloud cover, water temperature, wind, barometric pressure. Ultimately, that's like the biggest one.
Yeah.
And so what I'm looking at is, you know, where the fish are in the water column. You know, are they feeding on like reaction style baits, or is it more of a finesse bite? Things like that.
Yeah. Now, let's come over to you, Chris. No, you also fish quite a bit. I know you are on the river quite a bit. What are your experiences with weather and fishing?
Sure. We're fishing a shallow average depth. We don't have the water column like he has, where there's great
This
depth.
is a geeky show, so talk to our audience about water column, shallow depth. What are you talking about?
Okay,
here?
sure. So we have different features in the river, and so the gradient of the river.
Great difference there. All right.
Yeah, there's relief in the elevation of the river. A lot of people don't realize we've got like 130 feet of relief from Buford down into city limits.
Sure.
And so that creates the shoal areas and riffles and runs, and those type of features are where fish will hold. And so we're a shallow average depth, and so cloud cover versus sun is really important because the fish feel exposed to predators and people, fishermen. So we like overcast as well.
Okay, now tell me about this. Is there something magical about a 1 degree difference in water temperature? I'll come to Jim first, and then you can weigh in after that as well. I mean, what is it about one? Does that make a difference?
I don't know that one, you know, in the bodies of water where I'm typically fishing, like Cayuga Lake, Ontario, Oneida, big bodies of water, maybe not so much 1 degree, 5, definitely 10. And in some places you can find a 10-degree difference in the lake.
Is that right?
And so you'll have fish, you know, much shallower in the warmer areas than in the colder areas.
Right, right. What about you? The temperature make a difference in how you think about fishing?
It really does. We have in the river, the invertebrates, they hatch. So mayflies, caddisflies, stoneflies. And on a sunny day in early spring, 1 degree difference as it warms up, that triggers hatches. So we get aquatic insects that hatch, and that triggers the feeding behavior on the fish.
All right. Well, now, speaking of that, I want to come to each of you and let's talk about some of the conditions that are conducive for catching certain fish. So, Chris, trout. Are there any particular weather conditions or environmental conditions best for catching trout?
Well, basically on the Chattahoochee, we're looking for low, clear water. The fish will be concentrated. It's safer to be out there when the water's low. So rain events can cloudy up the water and make the volume increase. And so that can affect your productivity, the visibility for the trout. And so we are looking for low, clear water, and that increases our odds of catching, our catch rates increase.
Okay, what about small and largemouth bass?
Yeah, there's so much that, I mean, depending on what body of water, if I'm fishing in a river system or a lake, you know, some of that water in upstate New York is really clean. You know, Cayuga Lake, you can have visibility sometimes of like 20 feet.
Oh, wow.
So It definitely plays a role.
So does wind affect the sort of clearness or the turbidity of the lake in any way? Or?
It can, but really, wind helps break up the surface.
Okay.
And that's good for fishermen because it limits the visibility that the fish have in relation to being able to see you, which is a big deal, especially for high lakes that get a lot of pressure from other anglers. You know, some of those fish can be pretty spooky.
I see. So that there's a little bit of cat and mouse even going on with the fish and the fishermen.
Absolutely.
So what about striper, Chris?
Sure. So on the lower stretch of the Chattahoochee, there's another dam, and it's basically right here behind the building here.
Yep.
And the bass, striped bass, will run. They'll migrate up from the next reservoir that's downstream, called West Point. And so as that lake warms up, they sense that cool water, higher oxygen levels, and so they migrate. So we'll get a migration starting mid-May or so.
Okay, around this time.
Right about now,
Yeah.
we're beginning to see a migration, and so we're catching quite a few stripers.
Okay, wow. And the last one is walleye. I want to go to Jim for this one.
So yeah, walleye in particular, because their eyes, the way that they're positioned on their head, if you haven't seen one, they've got these big, they're like blue, beautiful eyes on the sides of their head. And the reason for that is because they feed at night. They're nocturnal, and they tend to feed on perch that are blind at night. So when you have really clear water and like a bluebird sky like we had today, that is going to shut those fish down. They're going to be pinned on the bottom. They'll still eat, but you basically have to put it right in front of their face because they're going to have a hard time seeing what they're looking at. You know, the fish today, they're post-spawn, so they're feeding on shad, and they're pushing those shad to the top. So we were really fortunate enough to be able to catch some fish on top water this morning, which is a great way to fish. It's exciting. But unfortunately...
Let me stop you right there, and I want to let you finish the story when we come back from the break. But when we come back from the break, we're going to bust some myths about fishing and weather. And we've got two experts that can help us do it. But first, our Geek of the Week.
Fishing and weather go together like peanut butter and jelly. That's why Shane Durrance is our Geek of the Week. He's a professional photographer and fishing guide in Georgia. In 2008, Shane snapped the only known image of Atlanta's EF2 tornado while it ripped through downtown. This shot, by the way, was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. He also caught the ensuing lightning show over the city. And when he's not taking award-winning pictures, he's out on the water chasing down giant stripers, redfish, and brown trout. Fisherman and photographer Shane Durrance, he's our Geek of the Week.
And welcome back to Weather Geeks, and we're talking all about fishing and weather and some of the sort of nuances of that relationship. Remember, weather affects every aspect of our life, and so it's not a surprise to any of us that it affects fishing. I want to come to you this time, Chris. What's your favorite place to fish?
Oh gosh, you know, the Chattahoochee is my favorite. That's my first love.
Yeah.
But I had the pleasure of fishing in New Zealand, so I've trout fished there. That's kind of the ultimate. It's a long way to go, but it's worth the journey.
Any
if you
particular
can do it.
weather, climate-related challenges or issues on that trip?
It is in the southern hemisphere, so they've got opposite seasons there, and it's the most varied topographical landmass in the world, I think, and so you've got these little microclimates all throughout those islands, and so you know, they kind of joke there, if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes, right?
I've heard that about New Zealand. What about you, Jim? I mean, because you do this for a living, or what?
Yeah.
Tell us about quickly what professional fisherman. What does that entail? Some of our viewers may not know.
We could debate that forever, but I mean, I fish and write full time.
Right. Okay.
What's
your favorite place?
I don't know, Cayuga, St. Lawrence, Ontario, Oneida, any one of them.
So you got kind of all kinds of places. Any sort of best fishing story that our viewers might be interested in hearing about from you?
I'd probably, the first time I ever fished Lake Ontario, we had really big waves. They were like 6 feet, and I got sick a lot. But I was catching a lot of fish, and they were big fish, so I stayed out there. And then around 1 o'clock, the lake laid down, and we made a run in. And because it was calm, we were like, we'll go now. When we left, there was another boat that was on that spot. The guy who was there caught the fish that beat me when we left.
Oh, now, was there any particular weather event going on that was causing those large waves? Or
A lot of wind.
Yeah,
There
it's
was a
just-
front coming in.
there's a front coming, yeah.
But you know, those waves like that for those smallmouth up north, that's a good thing.
Okay.
I mean, you want some waves, but it's a scary thing asking for wind on one of the Great Lakes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag there. What about you? Any sort of story that sticks out in your mind, fishing story?
Oh gosh, you know, on the Chattahoochee, we get caught in those pop-up thunderstorms,
Yep.
and we really got to watch them.
What's
We've
the
been
biggest
out where-
hazard with those? Is it the lightning?
Well, we've got the fly rods are longer, so 9-foot, 10-foot rods, and we've had our rods actually vibrating as the thunderstorms come through, and we've had lightning strikes nearby. So
Oh, wow.
that can we get off the river pretty quickly after that incident, but.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So yeah, remember that. Keep yourself low. You don't want to be the highest point at any time when you're out there in there at lightning. I'm going to close out probably 20 seconds each. Bucket list fishing trip. What's still out there that you want to do?
For me, I would love to go to Tasmania and fish spring creeks in Tasmania.
Okay.
Go back down under and go to the southern hemisphere, and they've got incredible hatches there. So you get mayflies that hatch really good dry fly fishing.
Okay. What about you, Jim?
Actually, it's coming up. It's a guided trip with Oliver Nye from Big Bass Dreams.
Oh wow.
So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. Where are you going?
Texas.
Okay. So yeah, that's your bucket list. Now, when we get back, you've heard them. There are all kind of myths out there. We're going to bust some myths with these two top experts next on Weather Geeks.
Oh yeah, come on, baby. Let's see. Yes, sir. Yeah, boy. Yeah.
And we are back on Weather Geeks, and we're bringing back one of our popular segments, the Hale Know segment. And I'm talking Hail, and we're going to myth bust because we know that there's some out there. So let's start with them, and I'll let either one of you take them. If the cows are lying down, the fish won't bite. Who wants to take that one?
I'm going to give that to you.
No. Anytime you hear that a fisherman or an angler come home and say the fish weren't biting today, that's a myth that fishermen created to make themselves feel better because they didn't catch anything.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the way that a fish is built, I mean, they have to eat in
Yes.
order to sustain themselves.
Sure.
It's like if they can't just lay down and rest. For the most part, I mean, it would be like if you lived your life on a treadmill. You would have to eat. So
Right.
they will always eat. They may not eat, you know, all day some days, but
Maybe
they're
they
still
just
going
don't
to
want
eat.
what you're offering them.
Exactly.
So what about fishing in rainy conditions?
Fish are already wet.
Yeah.
I tell all my clients sometimes we can convince them to go out in inclement weather, but it is excellent. You know, the overcast, low light related to rain
Yeah.
events, and the water a little bit murky actually hides you from the fish. And,
Right.
and we fish a lot of shallow water, so that water clarity is a big deal. So
okay.
a little murk is good.
Yeah, well, what about this notion, and you kind of alluded to a little bit, that the fish can hear the fishermen or they're looking up there at you? What's the deal with that? We'll go to Jim.
They can absolutely see you.
Yeah.
In clear water, they can.
Yeah.
And you want it clear. You don't want it so dirty that you can't see anything, because if you can't see anything, they can't see your bait. So, but they can hear you.
Yeah.
Whether or not it impacts them has a lot to do with how pressured that body of water is.
Right. So
Would you agree?
Sure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So
Oh,
they
yeah.
can hear you.
Yeah, and you know, we're in boats, so you can make a bit of racket, but we're again in shallow water, you know, rivers and streams compared to lakes, so they're a little more aware of their surroundings. So we still talk a lot out there. There's a lot of talk going on, but not.
That's true.
Yeah, so it's not,
Not too loud.
the golf level talk. whispering
there
going on, yeah. So what about freshwater fish becoming dormant in cold water? What's the deal with that?
Well, I'm dealing with trout, so the trout love cold water, and so cold water's good. But I know with warm water species, things tend to slow down.
They will slow down. They'll never, well, I shouldn't say never. aside from bed sickness, they don't really stop. Bed
Right.
sickness is when they get so fixated on, the spawn, the mating, that they won't eat for maybe a day and a half or 2 days. But that's about it.
Right.
And even then, they'll eat a tiny meal here and there. But
Well, what about let's kind of go to sort of your own practices. Any sort of things you consider bad luck in terms of fishing, or any big mistakes that people in general make when they're fishing? You're smiling here.
Yeah. So our joke is if you don't bring rain gear, you're gonna need it. So we bring it no matter what the forecast is. We bring rain gear, and that way, you'll definitely not have to stay dry.
Yeah. Yes. So that's one of the. Now, a little birdie told me to ask you guys about bananas.
not for me. My thing is, don't fill the live well before we catch one.
So what is it about the bananas, though?
I'll refer to you.
It's just a wives' tale. They don't have bananas in the boat.
Oh, okay, so it really is. Now, in this last minute or so, I mean, we're talking about climate and some things. Have you guys noticed any changes that may be related to any broader climate, warming waters where you fish, or are you not really paying attention at that level of detail?
Well, I know here on the Chattahoochee we have an alligator, which is unheard of,
Oh,
and
my
it's been for about 5 years. So there could be some relation to climate change.
Okay. We got to go, but thank you all for joining us. We're on Twitter at WX Geeks TWC, and we're also on Facebook. See you next week.
What makes me a weather geek, the fact that I love the weather, especially when it's hit me in the side of the face.
I'm gonna ride this one out, guys.
Be one of the thousands of weather geeks out there at weloveweather.tv.